Today's daf is daf Hey, daf 5. And we will begin on daf Dalet Amud Beis, where we left off, at the bottom of the page. Here's a fascinating Gemara that we're going to learn. Interesting. The Mishnah said that if the sukkah is not higher than 10 tefachim, then it's not kosher. If you have a mini sukkah that's less than about 2 3/4 feet, so it's not kosher. So the Gemara says, Manolan, how would I know that concept? Where do you see that in the Torah? Itmar. So there was a teaching. Rav, Rab Chanina, Rab Yochanan, Rab Chaviva. These four people. You have Rav, Rab Chanina, Rab Yochanan, and hold on. Okay. Rav, Rab Chanina, Rab Yochanan, Rab Chaviva. All those four people. Masna Bakula Seder Moed. Wherever you see them together in Seder Moed, right? In all the Masechtas of Seder Moed, Kolki Hai Zuga Chalufe Rabbi Yochanan Uma'ayel Rabbi Yonasan. Take out Rabbi Yochanan. It's a mistake. You're supposed to put in Rabbi Yonasan. In other words, there was an opinion when you see these groups of Amoraim saying a teaching, take out the Rabbi Yochanan and put a Rabbi Yonasan. So it's Rav, Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Yonasan, and Rabbi Chavina. So they gave the answer. How do I know that the height, the minimum height of a sukkah has to be 10 tefachim? So, because the answer is Orein Tisha, the Kaporas Tefach, Harekan Asara. We know in the building of the Mishkan. So in the main Orein, the Orein was 9. The box itself was 9, and then there's the Kaporas, which is that cover that held the kruvim. Okay. So that kaporos was a tefach. So let's just look at this from here, from the bottom till the top is 10 tefachim. Now, okay, so now the Gemara says, uksiv, and it says in the Chumash, v'nei adi l'cha sham v'dibarti idchem ala kaporos. God said that I'm going to talk to you from on top of the kaporos. So again, so to speak, hi Lewis, we just started. Okay, we just started. We're just discussing how do we know that the minimum shear for a sukkah is 10 tefachim. So the Mishnah said, the Gemara brought a teaching that said that since the Orein was 10 tefachim high, including the kaporos, the lid on top of it, so up until the kruvim was 10 tefachim. And so to speak, God spoke in between, right? He came down in between, but did not go lower. God just hovered above the box, which is 10 tefachim off the ground. So what the Gemara is going to say is just like 10 tefachim off the ground is another domain. God did not want to go into the, so to speak, too close to planet Earth. So he hovers 10 tefachim off the ground. So we see 10 tefachim is a number that defines different domains. So just like from top to bottom, 10 tefachim could decide that the bottom is another domain. So also off to the side, from one side to another side, 10 tefachim could be like a wall, a mechitza. That's what it says. Let's go to the top of the page. Betanya, we learned in a brisa. Rabbi Yossi said, La'olam, it never happened. La'yarda shchina lamata. God never came down to planet Earth lower than 10 tefachim, lower than that top of the Orein. Okay, and Moshe, who we find in the Chumash, went the closest to Hashem, and Eliyahu Navi. They didn't get so high to the heights, so to speak. They didn't get into the heavens. Shnei it says in the pasuk, Hashemayim Shemayim Hashem. The heavens belong to God, and leave that for God. V'haaretz, planet Earth, Nasan Livnei Adam, was given to humans. So therefore, God, so to speak, never comes down below 10 tefachim. Whatever that means, the Shekhinah is always hovering above 10 tefachim. That's the answer. So just like 10 tefachim would mean that going too close to Earth would be going, so to speak, Hashem, God, into another domain. So 10 tefachim is the cutoff point that defines domains from top to bottom and from right to left. Okay. So very interesting. Now, what does that mean? That God never came below 10 tefachim? Probably means that if there was so much kedusha, then there would not be bechira. You wouldn't be able to have choice. God, if so to speak, the Shekhinah, the presence of God was really close, so close to earth, then you wouldn't have Bechira. So that's what the Gemara is saying. God, Olam lo yarda Shekhinah lamata. The Shekhinah never came below Ted.
When Hashem did Makos Bechoros, didn't he kill the firstborn of all animals in Egypt also? And some of them could easily be below 2.5 feet.
So, very good. Excellent question. The Gemara doesn't ask that question, but it is a good question. But probably the answer is that he could have, shot something from above 10 tefachim.
From a conference, it has minutes and stuff. It's not a blind.
Right. So that's what it probably means. That he hold on. Yeah. Okay. Now, so the Gemara says, this is what you want to ask, Steve. The Shekhinah never came below 10 tefachim. Doesn't the pasuk say by the revelation in Har Sinai, by Yerid Hashem al Har Sinai, God came down to the Mount Sinai? So the Gemara answers, that was above 10 tefachim. God didn't get too close to the ground. He just hovered above 10 tefachim. Says the Gemara of Aksiv, it says in the pasuk, this talks, the Nevuah of Zechariah discusses that one day, I don't know, maybe not in our time, but it's going to happen that Jerusalem, they're going to attack Jerusalem and take over Jerusalem in the future. And then we're going to lose the war, and Jerusalem will go over into the Umas Olam. And God's going to come down on Har Zeisim and refight the Umas Olam and take over Yerushalayim again. And V'hoy Hashem lemelech hakol haaretz b'yamahu Hashem echad u'shmo echad. That's what Zechariah says. So what does the pasuk say? V'amdu raglav, so to speak, the feet of God will stand by Yomahu on that day, al Har Hazeisim, on the Mount of Olives. So God's feet is like standing on the Mount of Olives. So the Gemara says, Lama lama sar tefachim. He's not standing, so to speak. He's hovering above 10 tefachim above Har Hazeisim. Okay.
Well, that's also the future. So you can't prove from the future that Hashem ever came down below 10 tefachim. It's saying till now he's never come down. What will be in the future, we can't answer.
Okay, that's a good. That would be a good answer. But the Gemara probably here he says ma'olam. The word ma'olam means it can never happen. That's what. So therefore, even in the future, you probably it's not going to happen either. That's a good point. You heard what Steve said. It says maybe what it said it was only in the past. God never came below 10 tefachim. Maybe when the Mashiach comes, he will. But then the ma'olam means that God never will. So what does it mean? V'am the Raglov? It means that he's going to not stand on the Mount of Olives, but he's going to be hovering above 10 tefachim. Now the Gemara goes in reverse. Moshe and Eliyahu never came into the domain of God, so to speak, into the Shemayim. The pasuk says Moshe ole Elokim. Moshe went into, to God, so to speak, into the Shemayim. So the Gemara says Lamata Ma'asara. It means he was within 10 tefachim of the Shemayim, but not in the Shemayim. In other words, God, he was within 10 tefachim, but he didn't go into the Shemayim, so to speak, get too close to Elokim. But the pasuk says by Eliyahu, Vayal Eliyahu b'sa'ara hashamayim. He went with a cloud, with a wind, to the heavens, to the Shemayim. So Eliyahu did come to the Shemayim, where Hashem is, so to speak. Lamata Masara. You have to say that he didn't come into the Shemayim. He was just within 10 tefachim distance from the Shemayim, but he wasn't actually in the Shemayim. But the pasuk says that Ma'aches pnei kisei parses olav anonoi. Moshe Rabbeinu, that the Gemara darshans that Moshe Rabbeinu took a hold of the kisei hakavod, God's chair, so to speak, and God protected Moshe Rabbeinu so he could answer the malachim of the malachim did not want the Torah should be given to human beings, and God said to Moshe Rabbeinu, "They're right. You answer them." So Moshe grabbed a hold of the kisei hakavod because he was afraid that the malachim were going to burn him. So he grabbed a hold of the kisei hakavod, and God protected him. And he answered, "You malachim, you want the Torah? Do you have a yetzer hara? Do you have a desire to steal, to do sin, or whatever?" So that's why he debated the Malachim, so he won the debate, and the Torah was given to the Yidden. Rab Tamchen said, if God spread from his illumination of his presence and his cloud on Moshe Rabbeinu. So we see that he's very close to God. Again, Lamata Masara. God, spread it upon him, but Moshe Rabbeinu was within 10 Tfachim, but not that close to Hashem. The Gemara says, but that's not true, because he was holding on to the leg of the chair of God, so to speak, Siv. So the answer is God's chair lengthened, so to speak, outside the Shemayim domain into within 10 Tfachim of the ether domain, let's call it. And Moshe was there in that ether, and he held on to the Kisei HaKavod. So basically what you learned, that there are 3 domains in the world. There's the planet Earth, then there's where humans, below 10 Tvachim, then there's the place where Hashem is, in Shemayim, and then there's a place in between. Sometimes Hashem lowers his chair to go into that place, and sometimes humans go up to that place. But they don't get into each other's domain. Shemayim l'Hashem, the heavens belong to God, and the Aretz nasan l'bnei Adam. Okay, fine. Now the Gemara goes to so where did we learn that the sukkah has to be less than 10 tefachim? You learn it from where? The Aron. So the Gemara says Bishlama, it makes perfect sense. Aron Tisha, the box was 9 tefachim. Tiksiv asu Aron atzei shitim amasayim v'chetzi orkoi v'amachetzi rochpei v'amachetzi koimosai. Here's the word. The key word is the Torah says that the height of the box of the Aron was an amma, which is 6 tefachim, the chetzi and a half a amma, which is 3 tefachim. 6 plus 3 is 9 tefachim. So the box itself was 9. Ela kaparis, the lid, tefach min olon. How do I know that this lid, the thin lid that went on to the kaparis, was a tefach? So you could say that the total height of the box, including the lid, was 10 tefachim. How do you know the kaparis was 10? The Tanur Rab Chanina, Kol HaKelim Shosu Moshe. The answer is, Rab Chanina taught every keli that Moshe Rabbeinu gave Nosn ben Torahs midas orko midas rachma midas koimosam. The Torah tell you the length, the width, and the height. But kapiris, the lid, the Torah only told you midas orko, the length, or midas rachba, and the width. Nosna. It told you it should be the same size, width, and length as the box itself, as the aron. But midas koimosam loy nosna. It never told you what the thickness of the height of that lid is. So we don't know. But says Rab Chanina, say ulamad, you can learn it. The smallest part of one of the vessels of the Mishkan, the smallest vessel was a tefach, because the Tnema, it says vasisa loy miskeres toifach soviv. The Torah says you should make a let's call miskeres a frame made out of a tefach soviv. So we're going to bring up the handy Pirish Chai. This is a better picture than what I saw. Here, the Gemara learns, the shulchan, with the 12 loaf breads, but the shulchan itself was a table, and then the Torah says put a misgeres, like a bed frame, like a frame around it, lahavdil, like a nakhaki, lahavdil. But it's a thing that comes above it. So learns the Gemara right now. And this height of this misgeres was a tefach. So since this was a tefach, must be that the lid, the kaporis, you learn it from the misgeres, just like the misgeres was a tefach. The kaporis also, the lid on top of the aron was also a tefach. So the Gemara says, Malaham tefach, afkan tefach. Just like the misgeres was a tefach, so also over here was a tefach. Says the Gemara, v'neilech mikalim gufayu. Let's learn from any kalim. The shulchan itself was 2 amas high. I mean, why do you have to learn from the smallest one? So the Gemara says, when you have a choice to learn something from a small number or a large number, learn it from the small number. Because this is a mashal. Tafasta maru, if you grab too much, like tafasta, you grab nothing. Because if you overgrab and you turned out that you were wrong, they will penalize you and take away everything from you. But tafasta muet, but if you grab little, in other words, if you grab less than what you're supposed to, tafastu, they'll let you keep what you have. So therefore, you have a choice whether to learn the thickness of the lid from the miskeres, or you can learn it from any other kalim that was very tall. Learn it from the miskeres. You learn the minimum. You rather learn it from the minimum than the maximum. Okay, so if you're learning it from the smallest keli in the Mishkan, the neilef mitzitz, learn it from the tzitz. You should learn it from the tzitz. Tzitz was that head plate worn by the Kohen Gadol, which said Kodesh Lashem, that he wore on his forehead. And the Tanya we learned in the Brayta, tzitz doima kemin tas shel zahav. The headband of the Kohen Gadol was like a plate of gold. The rochav, the width of it was beis etzbaos, was 2 fingers. Umukaf ma'oizen la'oizen, and it came around his head from ear to ear. The kosev olav, and it was written on it beish shitim. It was written on it two words, 2 lines. Yud Kei Milmala. It said God's name on top, the Kodesh Lamata and Kodesh Lamed Milmata. So if you want to see what that looked like, this is the picture. Hold on one second. Pardon me. It said, this is the picture of how the tzitz looked. It said Kodesh on the bottom, and it said Yud Kei Vav Kei on the top. So you have to read it Kodesh, and then Hashem's name was on the top. So let's go back there. Now notice how the Gemara said it's wrote Yud Kei, the Yud and the Hey. It doesn't say Yud Kei and Vav and then the Hey, because you're not supposed to say that you're not allowed to write Yud Kei and Vav K. You're not allowed to write that because that's called Hoige Hashem Ba'os Yosef. Just saying the Yud K Vav K without Yud Hey, and you know what I'm trying to say. If you say it that way, a person could lose his chelik in olam haba. So even though you sometimes when you put on your tefillin or your talis, you say biyachat shem Yud K biv Vav K. You're saying the base that separates it. But that's why the Gemara only said Yud K and not Yud K Vav K. But what I'm trying to say is that you should know the real Shem Hamafirish was written on the forehead of the Kohen Gadol, but Kodesh was written on the bottom, La, and then on top of it was the Yud K Vav K. But what do you see from here? How thick was that tzitz? Was 2 fingers. So let's learn from the tzitz that the kapara should be a width of 2 fingers, a height of 2 fingers. Now, but the Gemara brings a side point over here. Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Yossi said, "Ani isi b'roimi." Remember, Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Yossi traveled to Rome, and in Rome, maybe the Vatican, they had the kalim of the Beis Hamikdash from destruction, and he saw in Rome the cost of olav, and he saw the clothing of the Kohen Gadol that said Kodesh Lashem b'shita achas. It said it in 1 line, not 2 lines. So that's how Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Yossi said that disagreed with the Chachamim. But here ends the question. You see that the tzitz was 2 fingers. So why don't we learn the kapiris, the lid from the tzitz? And says the Gemara is simple. Don and kli makli. You learn the kapiris from the miskeres because you're learning one vessel in the Mishkan to another vessel in the Mishkan. The ain't don and kli mimtashket. You learn a kli from an ornament. The tzitz was an ornament. It wasn't the vessel in the Beis Hamikdash. It was just like a piece of clothing, an article of clothing on the Kohen Gadol. Therefore, I can't learn the kapiris from that ornament. So the Gemara says, "V'neilach mizer, the amamar zer mashahu." There was a little crown on the. You see over here, there was a little crown on the table, and that could be like a little bit of a. It could be any size. It could be like 1 inch, and the Torah says, "Make a little crown on the shulchan." So, and that was 1 inch. So the answer is don and kli mikli. Let's learn from a keli from a keli. You learn kaparis from a misgeris, the frame, which is a kli from kli. Vein don and kli mechsha keli. You can't learn kaparis from a crown, which is just an ornament of a keli, but it's not the vessel itself. The frame was part of the vessel itself. So the Gemara says, what are you talking about? Hold it. Ihachi misgeris nami hechsha keli. the misgeres also is an ornament, because really you don't need it. Let's take a look at the picture of the misgeres. According to the way the Gemara understands, the misgeres came on top of the table. It was like a little ornament around, like a protective ornament. And on top of that, they put a little crown. So, but that was an ornament. So misgeres was not, the frame was not is not a keli. So the Gemara says, no, there's a misgeres, is an opinion that hold the frame was actually on the bottom by the legs, right over here. As you can see in this picture, its misgeres was on the bottom, and that held up the table itself. That held up the flat part of the table. So it was very necessary for a keli. That's what the Gemara is going to say. So Gemara says, the misgeres was on the bottom of the table, not on the top of it. So therefore, it was necessary to keep the legs together and hold the top of the table. So it was a real part of the keli itself. So the Gemara says, it makes sense. There was an opinion that says the misgeres came on top. Your teretz makes sense only if you learn that the misgeres was on the bottom, the frame was on the bottom. But if you learn that the misgeres was on top, then misgeres also is like an ornament of a keli. So why should I learn kaparis from an ornament of a keli? High heksha keli, it's only an ornament of a keli, but it's not the keli itself. So the Gemara says, no, Ella, I'd rather learn from the misgeres, from the shulchan, because at the end of the day, the Torah does give you some dimension of the shulchan, and the Torah does give you some dimension of the kaparis. But since the Torah gives you no dimension, or the crown, there is no dimension. So that's why I'd rather learn that the kaparis was a tefach. You learned it from the misgeres. You learn the kaparis, which the Torah tells you some of the measurement. It just didn't tell you the height of the kaparis. You learned it from something that Torah did give you a measurement, which is the misgeres. The Torah gave you the measurements of the misgeres. It's the size of the table plus the tefach. So it makes sense to learn the kaparis from the misgeres. Don't learn the kaparis from tzitz or vazer, the crown. This was, the Torah didn't tell you what size it should be. It was just al pi Kabbalah, they knew it, but it wasn't written in the Torah. That's why we don't learn the height of the kaparis from the tzitz or the crown. So the bottom line is, where we're up to is simple. How do I know that the lid on top of the box, was a tefach? The Torah doesn't say. The Torah just says it's the size of the box, but how the height, the Torah didn't tell you. The answer is you learn it from misgeres. The frame of the shulchan was a tefach, so the lid on the oren was also a tefach. Next, the Gemara gives you another teretz. How do I know that the lid was a tefach? Rav Huna says, I know it from here. The Torah says, al pnei kaparis kedma. Remember, in Yuma, he had to spray the blood. The Torah says you spray the blood al pnei, the face of the kaparis. He sprays the blood towards the face of that lid. And what's a face? So since the Torah calls it the kaparis a face, they ain't panim pachas mitefach. Wow. The Gemara says that it is impossible to have a face less than a few inches, even a baby face. There's no such a thing of a human face less than a tefach. So that's since the Torah called the lid a face, it must have been that it's a tefach. So the Gemara says, okay, who says that Pnei refers to a human face? The Ema Ka'ape, the bar, we go to the Amabeis, the bar Yuchni. Let's call this bar Yuchni a T-Rex, right? Or something like that, a dragon. It's a face of a giant, right? How do I know if a giant bird, galactic bird, that maybe that's the size of the kaparis? Because it also has a face. The answer is tefas the meruba like tefas the mu'at tefas. You always take the smaller shear. The smallest shear, the smallest shear in faces is the human face. It's a tefach. So I'd rather take the human face of a tefach than to take the shear of a dragon. So the Gemara says, if you're looking for faces, the ema ka'ape ditzi parta, say that the kaparis was the size of a baby bird. The face of a baby bird, the sutatuva, which is very small, much smaller than a tefach. So the Gemara says, Amar of Acha Bar Yaakov, Rav Huna Pnei Gomar. He learned the Gzeira Shava Pnei. Ksiv Hacha says that the kaparis, the lid had a Pnei kaparis, the face of the kaparis. The lid had a face. Uksiv, and there's another pasuk that says that Yaakov left the Eis Pnei Yitzchak Aviv, face of his father. So therefore, just like the Pnei, obviously, if Yitzchak is a human face, so the Pnei kaparis that the Torah says that the kaparis had a Pnei, it would be the shear of a human face. So the Gemara says, let us learn a Gzeira Shava of Pnei from the face of an angel. Diksiv, Kirois Pnei Elikim Vatirtzeni. That Yaakov told the Malach of Esav, I see your face, and your face looks like an angel face. So Pnei Elikim, and the angel face is much bigger than a human face. Again, Gemara answers Tafasta Merubaloi, Tafasta Muat Tafasta. So you rather learn from a human face, which is the smaller she'ir, than from an angel face. Okay, the Gemara says, B'neileth Mikruv, let us learn the face of the kaparis from the face of a kruv. Now the Gemara learns, the Gemara thought that the kruv face was a face of an angel. The ksiv el hakaparis yu pnei hakruvim. To the kaparis, they should face towards the lids, the face of the kruvim. So here you have the word pnei on the aron itself, and it's referring to the kruv face. So the kaparis should be thick as the kruv face. The kruv is this part, that the head. So the kaparis should be as thick as the pnei of the kruv, which is this angel face. So the Gemara answers, that's exactly it. Amar Rav Acha Bar Yaakov Gemiri, we have a tradition. Ein pnei kruvim pesuchim b'tefach. The face of those kruvim, of those cherubs that were on the aron, was not less than a tefach. So it was a tefach. Rav Huna namei mahachin gomer, and that's exactly what Rav Huna learned it from. He didn't learn it from the Eis Pnei Yitzchak Aviv. He actually learned it from the face that was actually on the aron. So again, where did Rav Huna learn that the thickness of this lid is a tefach? He learned it from the Torah says that the lid is a pnei, a face, and there's another pnei on the aron, which is the face of the kruv. So that's, you learn pnei to pnei, that they were both a tefach. So the Gemara says, my kruv. What does the word kruv mean? Amarababo kiravya, like a young baby, like a small child. She came babolo currently anuka ravya. They called a child ravya. So basically, those cherubim had the image of an angel with the wings, etc., but the face was the face of a child. Amalei Abaya, are you saying the face was a human face? Elamayata Diksiv, in the Nevuah of Yecheskel, it says he had a vision and he saw the Kisei HaKavod that had 4 faces. Pnei Echad, one of the faces was Pnei HaKruv, okay. Pnei Shneini, the second face on the chair, so to speak, or the Merkava, was a face of a human being. So we see a Kruv is not a human being. No. So the Gemara says, Hainu Kruv, Hainu Adam, is a Kruv an Adam? So the Gemara says, yes. Ape Ravrave, Ape Zutre. One is a large face and one is a small face. The Pnei Adam was a large face. Pnei HaKruv was a young kid's face. And those are the part of the 2 faces that was on the Merkava, that vision that Yecheskel saw. Okay. So where do we end off over here? Simple. We just gave you 2 sources that the Kapiris was a tefa. So but how does that get back to Sukkah? The answer is it gets back to Sukkah because God only came in between 10 tfachim above the box. So the box itself with the lid was 10 tfachim. So now the Gemara is going to ask a question, a very interesting question. How do you know that the 10 tfachim was the space in between, besides the lid? Maybe it includes the schach. How do I know that the 10 tfachim? You say that the schach has to be above 10 tfachim. Perhaps the sukkah could be 9 tfachim, and the schach will be a tefach, and therefore you include the schach. So how do I know from this source that it actually there was a gap, that the space below was 10 tfachim? Maybe it would include the schach. So the Gemara now throws the whole thing out the window. The answer is you're going to learn the source. Now, till now I've been telling you, how do you know that the source of 10 tfachim is because from the ground to the top of the lid was 10 tfachim. So the Gemara says, but the lid itself was a tefach, so maybe you include the schach as a tefach. So maybe you only need a 9 tfachim gap for a sukkah. So the Gemara says, no, we're going to learn it from this place over here, right over here, from the top of the wingspan down to the top of the lid was exactly 10 tfachim, right over here. And therefore, a sukkah, excluding the schach, has to have a gap, an airspace of 10 tfachim. That's what the Gemara is going to say. Elo mi beis olamim Gemara. You learn it from the Beis Hamikdash. The Ksivit Pasuk says in the Beis Hamikdash, "Va'abayis ashabon shloim el Hashem shishim ama orkayv esrim ama rachbay ushloishim ama kamasim." This is the key word. The height of the first Beis Hamikdash was 30 amas. Uksiv, and the Pasuk says, the kaimis hakruva echad, the one kruv that was in next to the Arain was Eser Amma, was 10 amas high. So basically, they came to 1/3 the height of the Beis Hamikdash was the kruv in the Beis Hamikdash, right? 10 amas to the 30 amma height of the total Beis Hamikdash. Chen kruv hasheni. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, Ma'amatzina b'Beis Halamid, the portions that Shlomo HaMelech built the Beis Hamikdash, that which was kruvim b'shlish habayis heinoimdim, that the kruvim stood at the height of the third of the building. That means it was at the 30% mark of the building. Mishkan name kruvim shlish habayis heinoimdim. Even in the Mishkan, the kruvim stood at a height of the third of the house. Okay, so what the Gemara is going to say is like this: Mishkan kamahava. How big was the Mishkan? Eser amas. Was the tallest part of the Mishkan was 10 amas. The ksiv esrim amas oirach hakarish. Fine. The length, the height of the Mishkan was 10 amas. Kamahavalu. So how do you break that down into tfachim? Shitim pishche. It's 60 tfachim. Why? Every amma is 6 tfachim. 6 times 10 is 60. Okay, so the height of the Mishkan was 60 tfachim. So tilta kama hava. What's a third of 60? Esrim pushre. So there was 10. Was 10 tfachim. So basically, what the Gemara is saying over here, from the bottom of the floor over here till the top, the maximum till the wingspan was 20. 1/3 of the height of the Mishkan. Okay, that's what the Gemara is going to say. Dal asar the aron v'kaparis. You take away 10 tfachim for the aron and the kaparis. Pashlu asar, you have a leftover 10. So there's a gap of 10 in between the wingspan to the top of the lid. So that's what the Gemara is saying. Uksiv, the pasuk says, "V'hoya hakruvim parsich nafayim lamala soichichem b'chanfeihem ala kaparis." The wings of the aron spread their wings, covering with their wings over the kaparas, over the lid. So that is the source that there's a 10 tfachim gap from the top of the wings to the kaparas, which is the place where Hashem was, so to speak, when he spoke to Moshe. So that's how you know a mishkan has to be, that the sukkah has to be 10 tfachim gap of ear space, not including the schach. So that's what the Gemara says. Karye rachmana schacha. The Torah calls it a covering. Lamala me'asara, what's above 10 tfachim. So the Gemara asks a question, and this will end. Mimai, we'll go to Hanicha. Mimai de gafini ilai reishe kamai. How do you know that the wings came above their head? If you notice the picture I've been showing you, the wings actually come across above their heads. maybe, and therefore you say from the top of the head was 20. And you're basically saying the wing was on top of the head, and therefore the wings had an airspace of 10, right? Because the wings came above their head. How do you know the wings came above the head? Maybe the wings came level to their head, so you're including the head itself as part of the top, and therefore there's only a 9 tefach gap in between from the wing to the lid, because it was lowered. It came mamish to the head, level with their head. How do you know that it was above their head? That's what the Gemara says. Dilma lahade reishe kaime. How do you know that the wings was on top of the head? Kaime dilma, it was level with the head. Amarav acha bar Yaakov lamalaksiv. The Torah tells you that the wings have to come above their head. So the wings of the Mishkan had to go of the Aron had to be above their head. So till the head actually was 20 tefachim. The wings is on top of that, which means that the airspace from the wings to the lid was a gap of 10 tefachim, because the Aron itself was 10. So the gap in between the wings to the bottom of the lid of the Aron was 10 tefachim. So one more question: the Ema de Midlei Tuva. Maybe the wings came way over the head. Maybe it came like 15 tefachim over the head. How do you know it was mamish just above the head? So the Gemara says, "Miksiv lamala lamala." The pasuk says, doesn't say above. The Torah says the kruvim were parsei chnafayim lamala, just above their heads, was spreading their wings just above their own heads. So the kruvim had wings just above their heads. So we know that the wing was above their heads, not more. Just to recap, how do I know? All we discussed today is how do I know that the 10 tefachim is the shear of the sukkah, the minimum shear of a sukkah? The answer is because since Hashem said, I'm not coming down to earth, I'm staying in between the wingspan of the Aron in my own space. So, and this space from the wing to the lid was 10 tefachim, and that's where Hashem, so to speak, spoke to Moshe and was there. So we know that is a reshus, a domain for itself, 10 tefachim. So also a sukkah, to be called a domain, to be called a proper sukkah, has to be 10 tefachim. That's it. That's all we learned. But we discussed also how do you know the kaparis was a tefach, and that took us on other things. Okay. Maybe Hashem tomorrow night as well.
Thank you.
Shikoyach Baruch, very nice. Thank you.
Tanach Meir.